Check out today's piece of OtakuDaiKun fan art. Oh wow, it's me! More specifically, this is a redraw of a work that we showcased on the channel previously. I'm seeing lots of improvement, especially with the shading of certain parts. Anyone want a summon ticket? Seriously, thank you so much, Samorg! Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun! Dai-chan here! Recently, I was bored one night and decided to try watching the anime Saiki K on Netflix because I heard it was funny. It kinda was, though I'll admit I was distracted by the anime's strong reliance on internal monologue. You know, when you hear a character's thoughts as a disembodied voice while their mouth doesn't move. Obviously, in Saiki K, it's a necessary component of the story given that the protagonist can hear other people's thoughts. He's also trying to keep a low profile with his powers, so you can't really tell what he's thinking externally. This is far from the only anime to use so much internal monologue, however, and I find it rather jarring when compared to live-action cinema. I studied film in college, and during that time, I took a course on writing screenplays. There, the class's professor advised us to avoid using internal monologue because it was a sign of bad writing, for film at least. It was in line with following the rule, show, don't tell, which encourages artists to convey important details through more creative means. For instance, rather than saying, "This guy is strong," or "This guy is evil," it's much more impactful to say, "This guy can lift trucks with his pinky," or "This guy eats orphaned children for breakfast." Thus, rather than having a character's thoughts spell out a detail for us, it's considered more tasteful to convey that information using things like expression, editing, lighting, and the composition of the frame. Rather than having a character think, "I miss my dead wife," you can just show a small, home-sized Japanese shrine dedicated to the wife. The fact that it's well kept and has a fresh offering would imply that the husband cares for and misses his wife. Sure enough, these disembodied voices are rare in cinema, and often when they show up, they feel a bit corny. Only a handful of films do it, such as A Christmas Story or Ferris Bueller's Day Off. More frequently, it's done for parody, such as in Austin Powers or Airplane. One example that's infamous for its poor reception is the theatrical release of Blade Runner. This cut of the film features voiceovers from Harrison Ford that are reminiscent of old film noir detective dramas. Stylistically, it should fit, but most everyone agrees that the director's cut is far superior, in part for how it doesn't hold your hand through the narrative so much. Despite all of this, inner monologues in anime are perfectly natural, especially in comedy anime. Komi Can't Communicate, for instance, has a series of skits revolving around Ren Yamai, a classmate who is creepily obsessed with Komi to a disturbing degree. She definitely voices her obsession from time to time, but the vast majority of her depraved nature is shared only to the audience through her stream of consciousness. The character Yadano Makiru is almost entirely conveyed through monologue. She considers herself a rival to Komi, always trying to compete in things like sports and beauty. It's all in her head, though, leaving the other characters confused by her weird behavior. When used for comedy like this, I can't help but get a bit frustrated. It's humor through delusion, and it's a lot like watching idiots in a horror movie make dumb decisions that get them all killed. I'm sure practically everyone can relate to this, but let's say you're having a text conversation with someone, and all of a sudden, they stop replying as frequently. It's very easy to fall to delusion, wondering if you've said something to upset them. Your brain can run through all sorts of reasons, many being overly dramatic or pessimistic, only for you to find out the other person was busy or had to go to dinner. Perhaps Japanese culture, which has people highly worried about what others think of them, lends itself to this style of comedy and storytelling. What I'm more interested in, however, is what about anime as a medium lends itself to internal monologues? Why is it so normal in anime, when in more cinematic works it's frowned upon? I can think of two main reasons. The first being that most anime are adaptations of manga, light novels, visual novels, and audio dramas. These other media have a more direct benefit from internal monologues than anime itself. Manga, despite being a heavily visual medium, has certain details it struggles to convey. The manga for Rurouni Kenshin, for instance, can't properly demonstrate the detailed choreography seen in the Trust and Betrayal OVA or its live-action versions. It greatly benefits from having spectators or the fighters themselves voicing their thoughts to enhance a battle's dramatic impact. Heck, I used internal monologue without even thinking when writing my first panel of Living with My Own Gender Bend. When Daikun tries a summoning ritual, the entire joke is that he messes up by getting distracted on what exactly Guardian of the Scales refers to. Not only do we need to hear his thoughts to get the joke, we also need to know that he screws up the ritual specifically because of those thoughts. Thus, it's much easier to use a single line where Daikun says, "Oh crap, I screwed up the spell," than it is to add pages of backstory so readers would understand what could cause a spell to fail in the first place. Visual novels are almost always written in first person, and as such, we are constantly in the protagonist's headspace. They'll have thoughts about every little thing that happens in the story, and much of how we feel relies on the nature of those thoughts. Light novels, or any form of literature, are more than capable of storytelling in a way that shows more than it tells. But conventionally, it's not unreasonable for a character's thoughts to just be told to us verbatim. Audio dramas are oratory by nature. While sounds can provide a sense of atmosphere, they wouldn't be able to tell you something a character does quietly. You'd need narration for it, a disembodied voice to help convey what's happening. While it's totally possible to adapt these works into anime without including the monologues, it's also perfectly normal for said monologues to show up in an anime. Even anime original stories contain internal monologues every now and then. After all, anime was originally conceived as a low-cost alternative to the expensive animation Disney specialized in back in the day. It cuts costs by using half as many pictures per second, and found ways to create animation with recycled assets. A still character, for instance, can talk by only having its mouth move. Another way to save money was for characters to simply tell us things that would otherwise require a lot of prep work for the audience to understand. A character telling us that, say, their parents died in a car wreck would be way more efficient than having to animate an entire flashback. We've come a long way since then, however. Anime can now imitate and even exceed the kinds of narrative techniques seen in live-action cinema. The original animated feature for Ghost in the Shell, for instance, rarely uses internal monologue, except for when Motoko is on the radio or linking up to others, and even then, those are more like telepathic conversations than the protagonist's expository thoughts. We don't hear Motoko going, "If we shoot at the glass above the spider tank, that'll disable its camouflage." Instead, she tells her helicopter pilot to shoot the windows, and we see for ourselves why she said that, based on their reaction. The theory that less is more creates a more immersive atmosphere in this case. This begs the question, even if it's normal and acceptable for anime to use internal monologues, should writers still be hesitant about actually using them? I suppose the best answer would be to use them when they're the most efficient and effective way to tell the story. Death Note is an anime that I feel would be worse off if it had its internal monologues detailed in other ways. What makes Light Yagami such an interesting character is his methodical attention to detail. When he brags to himself about his plans in the anime, it makes the story easier to follow, but it also fleshes him out more as a character while adding to the drama. We can compare the difference by looking at both the Death Note anime and then the Japanese live-action films. The scene with Naomi Misora is undeniably more effective in the anime directly because of Light's inner thoughts. After doing an amazing job eliminating the FBI agents on his tail, Light discovers a loose thread that could unravel his entire scheme. Naomi has revealed to Light that she believes Kira can kill without invoking heart attacks. If she informs the police, and L for that matter, they'd have a huge lead in their investigation. Thus, Light needs to speak carefully to Naomi and acquire her real name, and that requires slowly gaining her trust. At first, she gives him a fake name, and Light absolutely panics when he realizes he still can't kill her. He has to hide this panic and continue the conversation. He needs to somehow get her real name without letting her know how he knows the name she gave him was fake. It's incredibly intricate, and his thoughts represent individual narrative beats that the live-action version completely lacks. Instead, live-action Naomi comes off as far more confident and aggressive, upfront telling Light she used a fake name just moments after they meet. It's forced and doesn't make sense. Even if it did, it's still way more boring. A lot of shonen anime have an absurdly redundant amount of expository thought and dialogue. I mentioned Rurouni Kenshin before. Because the manga couldn't convey nuanced details about the fights, it made up for said details by explaining the fights to us through the combatants' thoughts, and bystanders who witnessed the fight and comment on it from afar. Initial D works the same way, and while it can get heavy-handed at times, some of that monologue does help the drama. Racers don't necessarily talk to themselves while driving, so it's nice to hear what Takumi's opponents think when he does crazy stuff in a race, such as turning off his headlights. First, we'll hear Takumi express a need to do something drastic. Then, we see what he does, and subsequently, what his opponent's reaction is. Then, word of his crazy stunt will go on the radio, and Ryosuke will explain the logic behind it. A lot of this could be inferred from context, but there are benefits from being a bit redundant. For one, it makes anime more accessible to blind fans, who have no choice but to rely on those descriptions. It also helps reinforce our understanding of how the writer thinks. When they show a guy moving at blinding speeds, and then another character goes, "Oh shit, he's too fast," it helps set the pace for things going forward. So yeah, internal monologues do have their uses. I want to apply what we've talked about towards a topic we can probably all relate to: Shiro Emiya. There's a lot of debate regarding Shiro's character, with people who have only watched the anime claiming how irrational and foolish his actions are. Defenders of Stay Night attest that his monologues in the visual novel do a great job of clarifying his actions and completely change your perception of him as a character. Daniel Santos has made a popular video covering just this issue. He remarks how some fans perceive Shiro as stubborn, reckless, and stupid for refusing other people's help, even though he's often very weak and defenseless against enemy servants. The video notes how the visual novel conveys that Shiro isn't just being stupid, but rather feels guilty for receiving other people's help, in turn putting them in more danger because of him. He feels guilty for having survived the Great Fire in Fuyuki, to the point where he can't fully enjoy a date with Rin and Saber without feeling unworthy of that happiness. Since this bit about unworthiness isn't present in the anime, the point of such a date gets lost. Shiro's unconditional hate of Archer, as well as an obsession with Archer's twin swords, seem more fleshed out in the visual novel. Now, I'm not about to say that these details in any way harm the visual novel, but I do feel like they were so overstated in Nasu's dense writing that the anime still gets these ideas across just fine without them. If you watch Unlimited Blade Works from start to finish, you will know that Shiro feels guilty about his survival, that he can't be happy for himself, that he doesn't want to be a burden to others, that he naturally dislikes Archer, and that he has a raging bone in his pants for swords. These ideas may not be as blunt, but they are definitely present. For Fate, it's not the same as it is for Death Note, where those monologues are important pieces of the plot. With an open mind to the other cinematic ways Ufotable tells the story, Shiro's monologues aren't as necessary, at least in my opinion, but maybe that's just me, having experienced both the anime and visual novel multiple times. The next step, obviously, is to take this conversation to you guys. What is your opinion on internal monologues in anime? Do you encourage them? Or do you prefer when authors use more restraint? Do you have examples of internal monologues you find either fitting or annoying? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Before I go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Free Brick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Johnny Tsunami, Link Pendrago, Caitlin P, Vladimir Ovna, Succubus Sakura, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
celebrate your fandom!